What would you do if the person you trusted the most slowly became a stranger, and loneliness pushed you toward a secret that could destroy everything? Today's story is about a marriage that looked perfect from the outside but was silently collapsing behind closed doors. A wealthy woman, a distant husband, and a humble servant whose presence changed everything. One secret moment turns into a dangerous affair, but the truth behind it is far darker than anyone expected. Stay with me until the end because the twist will completely change how you see every character in this story. And before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because we bring you the most intense movie recaps and storytelling that you won't want to miss. In a quiet countryside estate surrounded by tall trees and endless fields lived a woman named Elena whose life appeared luxurious and perfect to anyone looking from the outside. Yet behind the tall iron gates of the mansion her days were filled with silence, frustration, and a loneliness she could barely understand even after years of marriage, because her husband Victor was a powerful businessman who spent most of his time traveling between cities and countries chasing deals and expanding his empire. And although he provided wealth, security, and status, he slowly stopped providing the emotional warmth and attention that once made Elena fall in love with him, leaving her in a house that felt more like a beautiful prison than a home, where every room echoed with emptiness and every dinner table remained half untouched. And at first Elena tried to ignore the growing distance between them, telling herself that success demanded sacrifice and that Victor's long absences were only temporary. But as months turned into years the space between them became wider and colder, until conversations were reduced to short phone calls and formal greetings. And in that quiet house the only people she interacted with daily were the staff who worked there, including gardeners, cooks, and cleaners, among them a young man named Daniel who had arrived at the estate after the death of his father and who worked as a general servant helping with maintenance around the property. And unlike the others, Daniel carried a calm presence that Elena noticed without even realizing it, because he spoke little but always listened carefully. And whenever he worked in the gardens outside her window she found herself watching him for reasons she could not explain, perhaps because he moved through the world with a kind of honesty and simplicity that she had not seen in a long time, especially in a world filled with powerful men like Victor who were always calculating and ambitious. And at first their interactions were small and polite, simple greetings in the hallway or brief exchanges when he brought something she requested. Yet those short moments gradually became longer conversations, because Daniel was one of the few people who treated Elena not as the distant wife of a wealthy man but simply as a human being who might want to talk or laugh or share a quiet moment under the afternoon sun. And as the weeks passed Elena began walking through the gardens more often, telling herself she needed fresh air while secretly hoping she might run into Daniel among the roses and trees. And when they spoke the conversations felt strangely natural as if they had known each other for years, discussing ordinary things like books, childhood memories, and the simple beauty of the countryside, topics that Victor had long ago stopped caring about as his life became consumed by contracts and business negotiations. And although Elena tried to ignore the subtle warmth she felt when Daniel looked at her with genuine attention, she could not deny that his presence made the mansion feel less empty. Yet deep inside she knew that crossing the invisible boundary between employer and servant would bring consequences neither of them could control. So she tried to keep distance, convincing herself that these conversations were harmless and that loneliness was simply making her imagination wander. But the human heart rarely follows logic, and one rainy evening when a storm trapped everyone inside the mansion and Victor called to say he would be away for another month, Elena found herself sitting in the large kitchen after midnight unable to sleep, staring out at the rain hitting the windows. When Daniel entered quietly to check the doors, and seeing her there he hesitated as if unsure whether to leave or stay. Yet Elena asked him to sit for a moment because the storm made the house feel too silent. And what began as a short conversation slowly turned into hours of sharing stories about their lives, about the dreams Daniel once had before poverty forced him to work wherever he could, and about Elena's early marriage when Victor was still a passionate young man who promised they would conquer the world together. And somewhere during that long conversation the distance between them disappeared as if the storm outside had erased the boundaries that once kept them apart. And when Elena looked into Daniel's eyes she felt something she had not felt in years, the feeling of being truly seen, not as a wealthy wife or a symbol of status but as a woman who still had emotions and desires she had buried for too long. And that night became the beginning of a secret that neither of them planned yet both allowed to grow, because loneliness is a powerful force that slowly pushes people toward choices they once believed impossible. And as Victor continued traveling, Elena and Daniel found more moments together hidden from the rest of the staff, meeting in quiet corners of the estate or walking through the gardens after sunset when the world felt distant and unreal, convincing themselves that what they shared was something pure and temporary, a small escape from lives that had trapped them in different ways. Yet secrets never remain hidden forever, and unknown to them Victor had begun hearing rumors during his business trips about his wife spending unusual amounts of time with the staff, rumors whispered by jealous employees hoping to gain favor with the powerful man who owned the estate. And although Victor initially dismissed the gossip as nonsense, the idea slowly grew inside his mind like a shadow, until curiosity turned into suspicion, and one evening he returned to the mansion without warning weeks earlier than expected, arriving silently while the house slept, and what he discovered that night would change every life connected to the estate forever, because instead of finding betrayal as he feared, Victor uncovered something far more complicated and shocking. A hidden truth about Daniel's past that revealed their connection was not a simple affair but part of a much deeper story that had begun decades earlier when Victor himself made a decision that destroyed another family, a secret that meant the servant he hated might actually be the key to understanding the life he had built on ambition and forgotten promises. And as the truth unfolded, the mansion became a battlefield of emotions where love, guilt, revenge, and forgiveness collided, forcing Elena to confront whether her actions were the result of weakness or the desperate search for happiness in a life designed by someone else, while Daniel faced the painful realization that the man he worked for might be tied to the tragedy that shaped his childhood, and Victor himself stood at the center of the storm, realizing that the empire he spent his life building had cost him the one thing he never thought he could lose, the heart of the woman who once believed in him more than anyone else. And in the end, the greatest twist was not the affair itself but the discovery that every character in the story had been chasing something missing in their lives: love, dignity, redemption, or truth, and that sometimes the secrets we fear the most are the ones that reveal who we truly are when everything finally comes to light.